Good evening, Mayor Eddy, Vice Mayor Edigo, and council members. Matt Samson, your fire chief. So as the slides showed, Fire Station 63 was actually temporarily moved into the MSB in 1979. And from that, there's been, I think, 4, maybe 5 studies of fire department facilities that have identified that station in particular as being undersized. And going back to early 2000s, at the time of the 3rd study, we actually had to shut the firehouse down for 2 times for an extended amount of time because of health reasons. There was mold from a pretty substantial water leak, and then we had carbon monoxide that was actually flowing into the station from the police garage at a level that was toxic for our folks. We actually had to pull them out. And so at that time, we were heading into the recession in 2008. We were trying to find a path forward because we weren't sure if that fire station was going to remain viable at that time based on that. Not to mention all the other operational constraints that go along with it. And so we did apply for a FEMA grant as part of the Reinvestment Act to help build the economy back in 2009, and we're very fortunate to get selected. And what we did with that money was we modernized the fire and house. We reduced the health issues, meaning that we stopped the water leaks, we stopped the carbon monoxide from coming in, and actually made the fire station habitable for a gender-different workforce. Before it was a common bedroom, the showers were literally right across from each other, not able to do anything. We had 1 office for 5 people, which made it very cramped, especially as we move into technology and require more workspaces. We didn't have any of the modern facilities, meaning for decontamination, our gear was literally exhausting into the living quarters, so all the toxic stuff that our folks are exposed to in these incidents were coming in. So we made strides on that, but we were still very limited. One of the other big components of it is the fire station. If you look at the pictures pre-grant, it's the original height from the tire and brake shop that was part of the value giant. So we had to modify our fire engines, actually lowering them and lowering the light bars. So we actually couldn't fit all of our equipment in there. And so it made it very restrictive operationally. We could only fit certain fire engines in there. And so part of that, we needed to raise the apparatus bay roof or ceiling, and to do so, we had to structurally engineer it up. And one of the big concerns, as it was mentioned earlier in the seismic report, is that the actual facade of the facility is not tied strong to the 2nd floor of the roof, and so there's a concern that those concrete walls would fall down during an incident, compromising the structure where our folks would be living, and then also creating a situation where we couldn't get our fire apparatus out of the station itself. So we had a lot of things to check just to make sure we can continue operating efficiently, and that still didn't address the size restrictions of that fire station itself. And so we actually had a little bit of a gym and a training classroom in the back. Actually, it was where the majority of the department's training occurred. But to give everyone an individual bedroom, which is required for a modern firehouse, we took that space. And unfortunately, because of the constraints of the station, those bedrooms all have no windows. And so we beefed up the sprinkler system to try to maintain safety should our folks need to get out. But still, there's every other residential area has 2 ways out of a living room. And so during that time, we made the compromise to get the individual bedrooms so we could support a gender-different workforce itself. And so with those, we bought ourselves some time. And we thought we got to a place where we had the ability to find a more permanent solution. Fire Station 62 and 64 had recently undergone some seismic retrofit work at the turn of the century, and so now we have facilities that had a lot of seismic work done. Unfortunately, with 63, we still are somewhat limited. The grant dollars were restricted to the building's footprint. In partnership with the police department, the city was able to contribute a little bit more money to help reinforce their areas. But for the most part, we hardened the apparatus bay so we could get the equipment out. We tried to tie the concrete walls in the front to the building, but still there remains the collapse potential for our folks inside of that. And then we have a very limited space. In the memo I presented, Fire Station 63 is way below average size. Not only for our own department, based on number of firefighters, but we surveyed recent fire stations that were built throughout the peninsula and out the region, and we still come in way low. And where that impacts is the exercise facility for that station is up on the 2nd floor down the hallway in the police department. That was a shared resource coming out of the transition, out of the remodel. And so if our folks are going to be exercising, which we encourage them to do on duty, you're adding almost a minute to a response time to try to get back down, and that's just something we'd like to be able to remove for that. And then the other component is, as our mission grows and our demand for service grows, we need additional resources and apparatus, and we can't fit any of them in the firehouse. There's no space for that. And so because of that, we are leaving vehicles outside, and they're actually, the accelerated damage because of the weather is noticeable for that. And then we're also not able to future-proof or future design for a need. I mean, we're restricted. There's no more space at the station. And so we are packed to the gills with that. And so we feel that an adequate space that provides a living for at least additional person, much wider and longer apparatus space to support all the city's fleet of fire service, and then adequate storage for disaster supplies on top of what we already need and identified is the reason why I'm very strongly recommending that we no longer remain in that space if we can.
Thank you. That's really good information, and we definitely want to prioritize safety in their neighborhood. And I think you've really made the case clear why there needs to be a new building. But I also want to ask, for Fire Station 63, what neighborhoods does 63 serve, and also how busy is it when you compare it to the other fire stations in the city?
Yeah, so Fire Station 63 serves from the Colma border along the El Camino corridor all the way down almost to Seas Candy, and then on the west side of El Camino. It covers all the way up to Westboro, and then all the way down through the unincorporated area to the woods on that border there. And by call volume, Fire Station 63 year over year is our busiest station. It houses the ambulance and the engine. And between those two units, they're incredibly busy. North of 3,000 individual incidents come out of that station a year, which is pretty significant, even throughout the county.
Thank you.